Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing Connections podcast. I'm your host, Emmy Vadnais, and today we are talking about how to be a holistic mama with Michelle Bonang, who is a mama to 3 amazing children, or she calls loves, who is also an occupational therapist. She is also a registered yoga teacher, personal growth coach, and developer of the Holistic Mama community. Through Michelle's programs, she guides women through this sacred calling of motherhood with more peace, ease, self-love, and vitality. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Emmy. I'm excited.
Well, I would love it if you could just start a little bit and talk about your background of how you got into this holistic world.
Yeah. So I've always been into physical fitness or playing sports, and I always thought I was healthy. You know, I loved choosing the salad, but I grew up in a typical American household where we sometimes had frosted flakes for breakfast. And I want to say it was about 17 years ago, and I was doing my pediatric occupational therapy work in a school setting. And I was blessed to work with a physical therapist who's also an Ayurveda specialist. And one day we were sitting at lunch and she had gotten to know me a little better. And she said, "Could you please look at the ingredients in your peanut butter and then look in mine?" And I was having Skippy, and she had an organic peanut butter. And there were at least 5 to 6 ingredients in the Skippy, most I couldn't pronounce. And then hers said peanuts and salt. And honestly, that moment was a game changer for me to really just start taking control over the nutrition portion of my health. I realized that it wasn't just about going for runs that was going to keep me healthy. There was way more to being more holistic. And that was really the start of where I dove deeper into the nutrition piece. And then as I started having children, I realized that self-love and self-care was an enormous part of showing up as wholly and fully as I wanted to and needed to as a mom. And that is where I started diving deeper into yoga and meditation. And the more I did all of this in my life, and my oldest son also was struggling with some sensory processing challenges, emotional meltdowns when he was little. So when I started incorporating these techniques and changing over our food, our nutrition, our life just became so much more peaceful at home. And then I began to bring this more and more into my work. And in the mainstream schools, it can still be challenging, but I found ways to put a diffuser in my therapy room in the schools, or to, you know, just plant seeds and kind of just let parents know that there was another way if they were willing. And some let the seeds lie, and some really wanted to see the sprouts. So it was really just the education, and then I began to see some clients privately outside of the mainstream where I could really dive deep and share fully meal planning, holistic living. And I still kept going with the sensory processing pieces because I think that's important as well. But it's really when you dive deep into that gut health where you see the changes and the progress in these children and families. And it's just continued to grow more and more from there.
Well, I think it's wonderful that you have been able to improve your family's health and wellness. And it sounds like many other people, many people do know that there are certain foods that are more healthy for them. What do you think was the catalyst for you to make that switch, right? Because a lot of people know, well, that food is packed with so many processed ingredients, but I'm going to eat it because it tastes good. And it takes a lot of willpower for people to make that switch. What do you think was the motivating factor for you to be able to make that change and for that to be long lasting for you?
So it was actually when I got diagnosed with Lyme disease. Even though I had made small changes in our life before that, in my own life, it was really when I was sick. I could not walk up my basement stairs without pain in my knee. I was exhausted. I was less patient. And that is when I really dove headfirst into all of these changes. And even then, I think I dove in very fully initially, but after I'd start feeling better, I would maybe, test the waters with some of the other foods or things. And it took me a while to realize, okay, when I eat this, I have these symptoms, or when I drink this, I really am not feeling as optimal as I know I can, even with as I'm still healing my Lyme disease. I think that was the catalyst for my change. And when I switched over, that's when we really decided to dive into exploring gluten-free, casein-free for our oldest son. And I remember asking my husband for 4 months. I said, please dive in with me for 4 months on this and let's see the changes. And after about 2 to 3 weeks, I remember my husband looking at me saying, we have a different child. There's something to what we're doing. And that is really, that was the time when I really, really held on to the changes that we were making. And I don't think it has to come to somebody feeling sick, or, it doesn't have to come to that point, but that's where it came for me. And, every medical doctor that you read about or dive into their work, the ones that have become more holistic are usually the ones that have suffered an illness or a trauma and had them dive down a different path. So it's interesting, but if anybody is looking to make these changes too, I just offer yourself grace in the beginning. It's a journey and life is a journey. And I think that small changes add up over time. And I just, when I'm working with the holistic moms in my community, there's one mom that just always says, I'm making small changes. I'm making small changes. I'm not exactly where I want to be. And I said, but you will get there. You're making those small changes. So just offering yourself grace if you are making a switch for nutrition or finding more time for yourself. I think it's so important to offer yourself grace.
Right, because being a parent has a lot of demands. There's a lot of challenges. I mean, yes, it's rewarding and there's a lot of lovely, tender moments, but also it is time, it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of energy involved, sleepless nights. And so for a parent to make these kind of changes, usually there has to be some motivating factor, some type of suffering, really. Doesn't, and not that, and like you're saying, it isn't that somebody has to suffer to make changes, and to be able to really, because it is a lifestyle, right? To be able to make that lifestyle change. So are you able to share either with what was your son was doing before and how your son is doing now, or if you'd prefer to share, can you give an example of a client maybe you helped or somebody who's been improved, and how they were before, what their emotions were like, stress levels, if they were having pain, what kind of limitations or challenges were they experiencing, and how what you've been able to do has improved their lives?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind talking about my son, and he's okay with it. We've had some conversations, but a lot of what happens with him happens with many of my clients in a positive way. Before our changes, a lot of emotional meltdowns, just uncontrollable. I will never forget being in Kohl's during Christmas time, and he just had a meltdown in the middle of the aisle of a floor, and I just stood there. Of course, everybody was looking at me, and I let him work through it, and I felt judged for sure that I was just letting my child do this, but I knew he needed to work through whatever he was working through. The executive functioning piece, as he started to get older, just motor planning, getting ready in the morning, how do I get dressed, brush my teeth, what order do things need to go in? Really, I mean, bedwetting was another one too. And then once we made the changes, he really began to grow. My son also had some speech and fine motor challenges, which his gross motor was always excelling. Like he could do 360s off the couch at an extremely young age, but it was the fine motor and speech that he was lagging in. And a lot of children that I work with sensory processing disorder do have a motor planning challenge, whether, it be fine motor or gross motor or their speech. There's usually a connection because neurologically things are just not connected as a typical brain. So did you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask for those, because you and I are occupational therapists.
Right.
We understand this language, and not everybody listening is going to be an OT. So you've mentioned a few terms that I think that could deserve a little bit of definition, if you wouldn't mind sharing what motor planning is, what gross motor is, and what sensory processing is.
Yeah. So,
and even fine motor. We know what fine motor is, and some people might not know what fine motor is as well.
Yes. Thank you for having me do that clarification as I'm talking to an OT. It's easy to. So let's start with motor planning. So motor planning is just your ability to plan out a motor action, whether it be jumping, getting dressed, anything that you need to do to move your body is motor planning, movement. Gross motor skills are larger body movements and larger muscle movements. So running, walking, jumping, those are the gross motor skills. Fine motor are the more refined hand and finger movements that you need for buttoning and zippering and for handwriting and coloring, speech therapy. My son, it was a motor issue with speech. So his brain was not able to tell his mouth and tongue muscles what to do to get the words out. So that there was a motor component with the speech as well. And so sensory processing is, it's been kind of my life's work. I became sensory integration certified back in 2005, actually. So it's so intriguing and interesting to me. And to put it quickly, we all learn through our senses. Infants develop through their senses, and we have the 5 senses that we know about: taste, smell, touch, hearing. Then we have our internal senses, which are our vestibular sense, which is our awareness of body and space and gravity, and then our proprioceptive awareness, which has to do with our muscle and joint receptors. So those are less spoken about. So children with sensory integration disorder, these senses are not integrated for them. And that's when we see it in behaviors, maybe some attentional challenges, focus, and then the motor challenges like we spoke about. That is a very, very brief explanation. And, some kids are hypersensitive to sensory stimuli. Some kids are hypo. So it's really finding that just right challenge that children need when you're looking at all the various sensory systems. Is that helpful?
Yeah. So you were saying that your son was having a difficult time with this, and then what were the lifestyle changes or the holistic approaches that you implemented? You mentioned diet. Sounds like eating more naturally, more whole foods. What were some of the things that were put into place where even your husband started noticing these changes?
I think nutrition was the biggest piece for him because we already lived, we didn't do a lot of technology. I live in Vermont, so nature is in our back door. We were outdoors a lot, but getting vitamin D, Henry's hands were getting dirty. So the nutrition piece, I think, was the biggest piece for him. So we went gluten and casein free, all organic. So, there were no pesticides getting into his system, and all whole foods, soaking our own beans and just eliminating any processed foods that maybe were brought into the house before. And even before we did this, I thought we were eating a healthy diet, but there were still things that were getting into his system that he really just couldn't handle. And they have done studies and research, and children with sensory processing disorder do break down foods differently than maybe a typical child. And sometimes those foods become addicting. They want more and more of them, as if a drug addict wants more and more of a drug they get. That's the similar chemical reaction in the body of these children just because their gut bacteria is off. There's some neurological things off. So it's interesting to see how they crave these foods that really wreak havoc on their little systems.
What was his life like before those nutritional changes, and what changed for him? What did you notice? Did your son actually, did he exhibit different behaviors? Did he notice a change in himself?
He was so little. I don't, now he notices for sure. And we have very open conversations of food. But so he was having the fine motor and speech delays. He was having a lot of emotional meltdowns, bedwetting, more so than I would say typical after potty training is finished. And after we implemented these food changes, he just became a calmer child, and our life became easier and more peaceful, and bedtime was a much more graceful routine than it had been in the past. And then his speech just began blossoming. His fine motor skills, he was willing to sit with me and work on activities that I would do in my clinic or in the school with children, with so much more patience and so much more excitement to work through, any frustrations that would build for him. His attention and focus improved. And he's the most intuitive, sweetest, sensitive guy you'll ever meet. So, his emotional instability sometimes is a blessing for him, because I think he's an emotional being, but to the level that it gets to, living in that fight or flight, I think he was doing for many years of his tiny little life. And I think that we really just calmed his nervous system and brought him more into a serene place. And I think it's a culmination of everything. But I think for us, because we had already been doing so many of the technology pieces and the nature, I think the food was the last topper for us. And that really, really changed his life. And then I would say the same for all the clients that I worked with. The moms had the same results when they started implementing the strategies that I was recommending, and also continuing with some of the sensory integration therapy and, the motor activities that I recommended.
Well, I'm so happy for you and all the people who you've been able to help. So what does holistic mean to you?
Holistic means mind, body, and soul, mind, body, and spirit. It's really not one thing. And I think it can be unique for everybody. So for me in my life, it means nutrition is a big piece of that, just because we really have noticed that eating a whole food, gluten-free, casein-free diet makes such a difference in our world. It is finding the time for presence and mindfulness. And it doesn't mean I don't have to sit on my pillow every morning and find a time and space to meditate. I love when I get to do that, but it really is just being present and having awareness of this beautiful journey that we're gifted in this human body to live in our lives. And this is not to say that there are not some days that I want to pull my hair out, but really living through nutrition and presence and mindfulness and mindful movement and cyclical living has been a game changer for me. And I would put that right in that holistic term as well. Just following my woman cycle and really honoring where I am in my cycle and not pushing myself during times where my body is telling me clearly, like, no, this is a time for rest. And then following the moon as well, and just trying to live a more cyclical life with the universe, I think is a big piece of being holistic as well.
Well, and for those who are listening, what would you suggest? Because clearly you've done you're an occupational therapist, you've got your master's degree, you've gone and done this advanced training in yoga and sensory integration. And so somebody watching might think, well, that's easy for her to do because she knows how to implement this. But for those who are listening, what might be something simple that they could consider to start integrating into their lives just to kind of begin so it isn't so overwhelming? And then they, like you said, you can make those small changes and then build from there.
I really think self-love in motherhood is the key. And whatever that looks like, and whatever small changes that means for you, whether it is a bath once a week, that you get 30 minutes to yourself, I think it's that self-love and self-care that moms tend to feel guilty doing for themselves. Or I think our society has made it that we are not supposed to give ourselves this time, especially when we have infants or we're nursing. But I think that's where to start, is really honoring yourself, because the old adage, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Filling your cup first, putting your oxygen mask on first, because when you do that, you're going to show up more fully and more peacefully for your loved ones and for your kids and for your family. And mornings are a big piece of my life. And a lot of moms that I work with, I try to get, if they can even just get 20 minutes to themselves in the morning before anybody wakes up, to do a little magical morning routine, even just putting your hand on your heart and just saying, thank you, I get another day, can be so life changing and really change your outlook to a more positive view of the day, just by having that little gratitude practice in the morning.
Well, those are great examples. And what would you say to somebody who says, I'm too busy, I can barely even get time to have breakfast in the morning, let alone getting my children or my child ready?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you hear that a lot.
I mean, yes, you took the words out of my mouth, actually. Well, what is the saying? If you don't have 5 minutes to meditate, you need an hour. I mean, I'm going to repeat myself, and I do hear that a lot. It's very common. And don't get me wrong, I can still get to that place where I have to pull myself out of a hamster wheel that I can get myself in. But it's really that morning. It's the time in the morning. And even if it's hard and the bed is cozy and you feel like you just need to stay and sleep a little bit longer, I think if you can pull yourself out of bed and just have that little bit of time for yourself, whether, my morning is lemon water, and then I tend to do a meditation, and then I'll try to fit in some yoga, whether it's yin or a vinyasa flow, before I start my day. And that is when I think moms can get the most peace and quiet of their entire day, because even moms that are night people, I hear, by the time dinner is done and books are done, and if you're still nursing, and by the time all of that is done, it's really hard to get in that self-care that you really want to get in. And I do think that a morning routine for yourself is the best way to get in that time. I will also say that, if moms are driving somewhere by themselves, or sometimes even when you're just washing your hands, to close your eyes and just take 10 deep breaths. Or if you're by yourself in your car, put on your favorite podcast, or you can put on a guided meditation when you're driving. You're not going to get into that meditative state, but it can shift your whole system. Or, have a dance party in the car by yourself. Whatever it is, take hold of those times that you are alone, even if it's not through a magical morning routine, like I try to get a lot of moms to work on.
Well, that's a
Is that
great
helpful?
example. Yeah. I think those small steps of like just even taking one full breath in and out, and just kind of pausing, and maybe even just checking in of how you feel in the moment, or really what might be upsetting or bothering you if you're in a foul mood.
Mhm.
Um,
And one more thing I'll say.
yeah,
Oh,
by all
sorry.
means.
I remember putting these signs all over my house, and it was from Deepak Chopra, and he has a acronym STOP, and it's stop what you're doing, take deep breaths, observe your body, observe how you are feeling, and then proceed with loving awareness. And just I had one right above my sink on my window. I wrote it on my kid's easel in the living room. I had one in the bathroom, and just having those visual reminders too, because as moms, you can get so caught up in the fighting, the kids fighting, or you're rushing and everybody has to get, it's in that hamster wheel. And those visuals during really hard times were a really good reminder for me when I would forget that I needed that time and space. Like, okay, right. That's there for me. I just need to stop. And I mean, and it doesn't have to be Deepak Chopra's, but that was a wonderful one for me. And it's easy to teach your children as well to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, those are great examples. I love that. And I was just going to offer that I, for years, wanted to have what you're describing. And I think many people listening might have some beginnings of this kind of lifestyle that you're describing. And some people might think, oh, that's so idealistic, I'll never get there. And I know for myself, even not having children years ago, that I would listen to some of my friends. This is when yoga was starting to get more popular, probably 15 plus years ago. And they would talk about how they had this morning routine. And even if they just did 10 minutes of maybe some breath work or some meditation or yoga in the morning, and I was quite envious of them because I felt like, wow, how do I develop that when I just feel that my life is so busy? And there were times that I was working 2 and 3 jobs and just had a very, very full life, and running my own business, which is a whole other conversation. It's maybe like having a child or many children. And over the years, I have developed that morning routine. And I just want to echo what you're saying, that I went and took yoga classes. I've been studying meditation and various forms of mind, body, spirit, holistic health for over 20 years. But I noticed that when I started having that morning routine, that my days really changed. And I think you would probably agree that intention is very important. And so if we can, and one of the things I started years ago is, before I even get out of bed in the morning, is to say that it's going to be a really good or great day. Mm-hmm. And even if I wake up in I'm a little tired, I didn't give as much sleep, or maybe there's something that I perceive might be challenging the next day, I just tell myself it's going to be a great day. and then I have that routine, which can really center us so that we can be more clear as we go forward in the day. So I love that, of being able to start. And like you say, if somebody's maybe not a morning person, could they start this routine a different time of the day that might work for them in the beginning?
Yes, I do. I just think that for moms, especially, it can be challenging, but by the time nighttime falls, it's, but there are some moms that would rather sit and do a meditation right before bed, and that's their kind of centering, and it helps them wake up in a more positive way. But I love what you said before you get out of bed, because that's when I do my thank you. I put my hand over my heart and I say thank you before I get out of bed, because there's mornings that you're just like, oh, I'm tired, or I really don't feel like making lunch boxes today. But just like shifting it, like, okay, I get to empty the dishwasher, I get to make lunch boxes. How lucky am I? It's amazing how our thinking can shift when we change the way we say things in our mind.
Yeah, so much of our lives seems to be about getting somewhere or getting to the next thing. And I had this thought just in the last few years of, wow, what if at the end of my life, I didn't really pause to really appreciate what was happening. Right? So that gratitude.
The gratitude practice is huge. And we have a little elephant notebook right in our hallway on a bookshelf, and there's a pen right by it. And sometimes the kids will just go in and draw a picture or write what they're grateful for. And on those days where I'm just like, okay, I'm going to get through this day, that's when I pull out my gratitude journal. And all of a sudden you're jotting down 6 things that you're grateful for just from that day, and that can even shift my entire mindset. And I don't want it to sound so blissful either, though, because there are very not blissful days in my life, and there are mornings when I stay in bed, and there are times when I don't do the mindful movement. It's just, I don't let those times build, because then I get into a more negative state. I'm very consistent with many of these practices. It doesn't mean they never slip. It doesn't mean we don't have bad days. It doesn't mean my kids don't, wrestle each other to the ground. Those for sure happen. But in the grand scheme of life, the not rushing is a big piece of it too. You know, we've taught our kids that we don't play 5 sports during one season because that just doesn't work for our family, because we need to be with us and you need to enjoy your childhood and explore. But really having some sort of consistency with all of these routines that I've spoke about has really been life-changing, and I think has helped us live a more peaceful, enjoyable life with 3 little kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's important to honor how we authentically feel. And at the same time, we can take some of these very simple practices and integrate them into our lives. And you'll notice, there's
Yes.
research that even if you at just one time a week, go ahead and take a moment to pause and think about what you're grateful for, even just one aspect of your life. There's research that this can actually change your mood. It's correlated with better health, and you can build on there. And so these are really great examples. Going to bed at night. This is something that I do when I remember, but it's a great practice when I put my head on the pillow of what am I grateful for this day? Or even just saying thank you for this day, or just being grateful for having that.
We've done this for many years, and my daughter is the cutest. She loves to say, okay, let's do our gratefuls. But doing this at dinner with your family is a beautiful time to just say we go around and just say 2 things we're each grateful for that day. And it's lovely to get your children involved in that as well. And dinner just happens to be the time that we're all sitting, we're all present, and that's when we choose to do it. And and sometimes it's just they're grateful for their dinner on their plate. It doesn't have to be anything huge, but it teaches your children young to find gratitude in that day. And it's adorable to see when they get excited to bring it up and start it if we forget to do it. So
I love that.
yeah.
And even there's evidence that the family is healthier, that the relationships are healthier, that people are healthier, even sitting down and having a meal together.
Yeah.
So your community focuses a lot on the mamas. Can the papas or the dads be a holistic mama? Or I would imagine that through your work, do you ever connect with supporting any men as well? Or what would you like to say to any of the men out there, or any of those who identify as a male?
And I have worked with dads in the past, when they bring their children to me, and I loved when the dads were a part of our appointments, because they really got to see and hear and listen and take hold of what we were doing, because so often the moms were typically the ones bringing their children to the therapy sessions, and it's not the same when you're getting it by hearsay versus when you're really seeing it live and in person, and then being able to talk together. So yes, I think the dads, we can have holistic dads 100%. And I think that communication is a big piece of that in a relationship and a marriage. And I think that I have focused so much on moms because, 1, I'm a woman. 2, I have focused on the woman's cycle as well, and just our hormones are different than many of our partners or husbands. But I think that I just saw something on Instagram, and I can't remember what account it was, but it was like, where are my dads at? Why are the dads quiet? It's because the moms are doing all this work for, I think it was around health freedom and just things like that. And this guy wrote all on his own. He's like, I keep seeing these moms posts. Where are my dads? And I think that it was right after I read your email and question, Emmy. And I was like, oh, how appropriate on this timing, because it's true. And I think that as moms, we take on so much. And that's another piece of the holistic mama, is sharing your plate, asking for help, and bringing your husband in or your partner in to be on the same page with you and take over that holistic dad role a little bit. And I 100%, these offerings and these teachings, besides when I talk about menstruation and the woman's cycle, everything is extremely relevant to the dads of the world today, especially today when so many moms are out there working as well. We need that teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
I know, holistic parenting is what I should call it.
Oh, no, I think it's fine to call it holistic mama. And
No, I just was thinking, as you know, it's important, and it's a wonderful question.
I think in a lot of cases, women in general, or people who identify as female, tend to reach out for support more than their male counterparts. Because we're talking about holistic mamas, I just didn't want anybody to feel left out of this conversation, no matter how somebody identifies with their gender, and to recognize whether somebody's in a partnership, in a recognized legal marriage, or if they're single, that yes, that nurturing, that feminine quality, and of course everything you're mentioning about with hormones and all of that is very relevant. And I just bring it up because also I don't want any male counterparts to feel left out of the conversation, because they're very much part, like you say, of that family.
Yeah. And I actually have a cousin who raised a daughter with his husband. They actually got married, and it was beautiful to watch them as two men raise their daughter so beautifully in this world today. And one, I think one did take more of a more female role, and one took a more masculine role in that relationship of parenting. And but sometimes it would switch for them as well. And I think that was a really good point to bring up. And yeah, however anybody identifies, I think that coming back to the beginning, it's that self-love and self-care for you. Mm-hmm. Right? It's finding that time for you to be able to show up as you would love to in your life, and then for your children.
Myself, being an occupational therapist, I've worked with children, I've worked with parents, I've worked with grandparents, and I have one of my best friends is also a pediatric occupational therapist who's worked with thousands of families over the past 25 years. And we've recognized how when you are supporting children, and this is probably why you're focusing on the mama, is that in order for them to do well, the parent or the parents need to be doing well. It's a whole family system unit.
100%. Mm-hmm. And when, and I'm saying this again, but yeah, that self-love and self-care is where you will get to that point where you can show up well for your children, and then they can figure out who they are supposed to be in life, you know? So
right, the parent is the role model. It's often the child mirrors what the parents do. So what other improvements do you see for your holistic mamas and their families when you support them through your community?
I've noticed a lot of them have said they just have so much more patience for their children, and they are more easily reminded that they're children and that their brains really are not close to fully developed yet. And it is amazing as moms how we can forget in our houses how young our children really, really are. You know, you get so caught up in just you're living in this house, and when you come back to where, from a neurological standpoint, and their brains are still developing, so they're not at the point where you can expect so much from them. The moms have said a big thing for me is them opening up time and space for themselves, and in return getting peace and vitality. And a lot of the moms have really said that their energy levels and their joyfulness has improved. And it's really when they find the time and the space for themselves. And one mom, we did a little cleanse together in January, and in our last coaching call, one mom just said that she doesn't think she's ever felt better in all of her life. And it wasn't just the food. The food had a lot to do with it, but it was the meditation and the mindfulness and the presence that we've been working on through the past 8 months together. And that was so awesome to hear. And, you know, our children are not listening to us, they're watching us. So as your children watch you make these shifts and changes, however big or small, they're learning from what you're doing. And that's been a big piece of what the holistic moms have said too, which is really awesome.
Mm. Well, and you're such a wonderful role model for all of us. I mean, you
Oh, thank
are
you, Emmy.
I would imagine, is your Lyme's disease much better now? Because you seem very vital and healthy.
Yeah, if I stray too far from my normal diet, I definitely will get small symptoms, but I really think that it's pretty dormant at this point. And I haven't had any blood work or tests done to see, or antibodies done, but I think I'm pretty healed from it. I still have to be careful, but I'm also not 20 anymore, so that could also be a piece of it. But I'm typically a high energy person to begin with. So yeah, I think that I'm pretty healed from my Lyme.
Oh, well done. Beautiful job.
Thanks, Emmy.
Is there anything else you would like to share, or can you also describe how you support your holistic mama community?
If COVID could teach us one thing, I think that it taught us to be home, right? It taught us that we don't need to run somewhere or every hour be entertained or doing something. And I'm hoping that this is the blessing of COVID that we can take with us, and really just coming back to that presence. Because from March to August last year, and granted, I am blessed, this is not minimizing any of the ill effects of this virus, but from March to August, my children they loved being home together. And it was just such a beautiful time to bond and enjoy one another's company. So I think if we can always hold on to that time and come back to that, I think that would be really, really beautiful in our fast paced, on the go, kids getting into sports. If you didn't join gymnastics by 4, you're not going to be the next. Maybe you can't even get on a high school team. I think if this gift of COVID can give us all of these, give us the awareness that letting children be children and slowing down and not running everywhere is an incredible journey that we should all be on. I hope that made sense. But and then for the holistic moms, I would say the biggest pieces of our community have been the yoga, the meditations. They all love the monthly master classes that are put out there. And Emmy was a beautiful masterclass interviewee on intuition right around Christmas time that they really loved. I've had so many beautiful women that I've had the pleasure and honor to interview every month. And that's been really inspiring and educational for all of the moms, whether it's about intuition or how to use essential oils, the nutrition piece, meditation. All of these interviews have just been a wonderful monthly grounding force of how to make these small changes over time. And I think that really is the backbone of the holistic mama community. And we've also brought some anti-racism talks into the community, because that's just something that I am a subject that I'm extremely passionate about. And I feel blessed that I grew up in a multiracial area and school and have wonderful Black friends that I've reached out to so much in the past year because of all of the ongoings in our country. So that has been a piece of the holistic mama community as well this year, which has been really, I think, soul filling and educational. And it's white women having this conversation as well, which has been really nice. And that's really the backbone of it all. And then seeing, this isn't work for me. This is, when I sit down to do all of this for the holistic mama community or for my work as an OT, it's so soul filling or rewarding when you see the beautiful progress that it's just so enjoyable and fulfilling. So
Right. You get to see positive aspects happen in people's lives. So how can people find you?
You can find me. I'm on Instagram at Michelle Bonang, and my website is Michelle Bonang, BONANG.com. And I just put a new video up that you can purchase. It's a little mini course called Becoming You, where I talk a lot about the magical morning routine and cyclical living just to find more peace and vitality. So, yeah, those are the two places that I'm the most active, I would say. I'm on Facebook, but I'm not as active on there.
And if somebody wanted to work with you or wanted support with your holistic mama community, how do they get started with that?
So I have various offerings on my website. I can do one-on-one coaching. We can also set up a discovery call to see if we're even going to be a good fit for one another. Or you can join my programs. I offer a Mama Power program, which is 4 sessions long, which I just closed up a session, and that one follows the moon cycle. So we begin on a new moon and we end on a last quarter moon. So we incorporate the moon cycle with us as we walk through our 4 sessions. And that has been a really fun new offering that I just started this year in 2021. And the Holistic Mama community, I will reopen again this summer. And it's a year-long program where you get free access to yoga and all of the offerings that I have spoken about. So there's a lot of different ways that we can work together.
Well, you are such an inspiration, Michelle, and such a light and so much love that you spread in the world. I'm just grateful for that and for you. And I definitely hope that everybody checks out your website, michellebonang.com. Check you out on Instagram. I find what you share very inspiring, and I think that it can help keep us all motivated to really strive for some of these great suggestions and improvements in our lives, because you'll be able to see the rewards. You'll be able to feel them in your mind, your body, and your soul.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Emmy. This has been such a joy.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining us, Michelle, and everybody listening. Thank you so much. Be well, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.